Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. Today is Wednesday, July 10th, 2024. I'm John Podhoretz, the editor of Commentary Magazine. Reminding you that on Sunday, November 17th, 2024, we will be hosting our 14th annual Commentary Roast, our annual event. Roasties in the past have included Dick Cheney, Joe Lieberman, Jonah Goldberg, Charles Krauthammer, Norman Podhoretz, Midge Decter, Bill Kristol, Meir Soloveichik, Barry Weiss, Ben Shapiro, and this year's is the greatest living Jewish hero, Natan Sharansky. How do you roast Natan Sharansky? Come to New York and find out on the 17th of November. To find out how you can do that, go to commentary.org/roast. But now we must begin our podcast with my colleagues, Washington commentary columnist and the director of domestic policy studies at the American Enterprise Institute, Matthew Continetti. Hi, Matt.
Hi, John.
Matt's colleague at the American Enterprise Institute, our media commentary columnist, Christine Rosen. Hi, Christine.
Hi, John.
And Commentary's own senior editor, Seth Mandel. Hi, Seth.
Hi, John.
Okay, guys, I got to read you something that happened just before we started recording this morning. Nancy Pelosi went on Morning Joe, which is now, of course, the Fox and Friends of the Biden administration. What Fox and Friends was to the Trump administration, Morning Joe is now becoming to the Biden administration. It is like the bulletin board of whatever is going to be discussed during the day about the hijinks inside the White House from the perspective of the White House. Nancy Pelosi, of course, no longer Speaker of the House, but maybe the most well-known, or certainly the most respected, or the most whatever Democratic member of the House, is asked what's going to happen, and she says it's up to the president to decide if he is going to run. We're all encouraging him to make that decision because time is running short. And Jonathan Lemire of MSNBC says to her, do you want him to run? And Pelosi says, I want him to do whatever he decides to do, and that's the way it is. Whatever he decides, we go with. Then she says he should deal with the NATO conference and restart the discussion on the future after the NATO conference, which begins today. Let's just hold off, Pelosi says. Whatever you're thinking, either tell somebody privately. She's now referring, by the way, to all Democrats, I guess. But you don't have to put that out on the table until we see how we go this week. Matt?
I just love this intervention by Pelosi in so many ways, because up until her appearance on Morning Joe this morning, people thought, and the media said, Biden has this under control. He's tamped down the revolt. Very few people are unwilling to say that he needs to go. NATO speech yesterday night was strong. And here comes Pelosi saying, it's not really a settled issue, and he needs to do what he wants to do. I mean, she's also playing into the mealy-mouthed responses from so many Democrats while leaving the door open. And the second thing I would say, though, is I've just become annoyed in the last 48 hours by the way in which Democrats talk about the Biden question, because as she kind of alludes in her remarks, Pelosi and others and liberal media types are saying, well, this is a family matter. We're in a family here, the Democrats. We're a family, and we have to talk about this like a family does. You don't want to be direct, and family relations can be so fraught and difficult, and we're dealing with a relative. You're not a family. Come on. You're an old political party, and you have this disaster of a candidate, and you're not taking definitive stands because you're afraid of what might happen if you were to challenge Biden. And you've become, as John, you pointed out on Monday's podcast, a reflection of the Republicans who you've spent a decade now criticizing for unable to take a direct stance against Donald Trump. So the family talk has got to stop. If only they talk about actual families the way that they talk about the Democratic Party as a family.
I mean,
It's
look,
like the
she'd
government thing. You know how they always say, well, government is us. No, it's not. And the Democratic Party is not a family.
Well, it's also interesting though, because she obviously, if she read the letter that Biden sent on Monday to Capitol Hill saying, I am in it to win it. There's no more questioning. If you question, you're a foe of democracy because you're supporting Trump by questioning me. She obviously read that and thought, I kind of took her remarks today to reminded me of when one of my teenagers did something stupid. And I'm like, next time we need to make better choices, right? You're sort of trying to guide them, but you don't really have any leverage anymore because they're almost adults. So but the what I loved about it is that it showed the absolute hollowness of this effort on behalf of Biden and Biden himself to say that he's standing for democracy. That has now been, even his own party is saying this really isn't about democracy and the future of democracy. So that makes me happy that we can stop having that sort of pretense of a discussion.
The leverage that seems to be being exerted over the Democratic Party is that we can't change horses at this point because the risks are too great. But here's what we're hearing. First of all, there's a story right now in Politico about New York State that says that there are 3 private polls that have the race in New York State a 1-point race between Trump and Biden. Now, let me just say this flatly. If Donald Trump wins New York State, he's winning 35 states. There are comparable polls, apparently, private polls in Oregon, in Minnesota. Let's not even talk about the public polling that has Trump up by 6. An AARP bipartisan poll in Wisconsin has Trump up by 6 and has Tammy Baldwin, the Democratic candidate for Senate, the incumbent Democrat, up by 5. So Biden in this poll is underperforming Tammy Baldwin by 11. And if you do the math, it means that 1 in 10 Tammy Baldwin voters are going to vote for Trump. So that's Wisconsin. So if Wisconsin's off the map, and the public polling in Pennsylvania, most recently done, has Trump up by 7, and he's close in New York, and Oregon is somehow in the conversation. What the leverage of saying we can't have this conversation because it's going to damage Biden's prospects seems to me to be demented. I understand the theory that says you don't want to question the candidate that you have because you'll weaken the candidate, but that's really like why you shouldn't primary a sitting president in the year before the presidency, because you could basically open up a conversation.
Can I ask you a question,
Yes.
John? At what point in 1996 did you know Bob Dole was going to lose?
February, I think.
And as I recall from the history and my researches, there was no great move to replace Bob Dole on the ticket, right? Even though by the summer, people basically had resigned themselves to the fact that he was going to lose.
None. I mean,
right.
First of all, there was all this like, no. There are these moments, things could happen. You never know, because Dole could make an amazing vice presidential pick, and wait till people find out about his unbelievably heroic life story. And
well, then he stayed up all night.
stage.
Remember, he stayed up all night.
He fell in
He stayed
September,
off a
right?
stage.
Yes, he did fall in September.
Right.
But the point was that it was clear that Clinton, after Clinton gave the State of the Union in 1996, the notorious, amazing, famous State of the Union, in which he said the era of big government is over, and welfare reform passed, and the economy grew by some gigantic number in the first quarter. So maybe that was more like March. That Dole was 10 points behind or something like that. So he always was behind. So Trump is not behind that much nationally, but the Cook political report, not exactly any.
You mean Biden is not behind Biden?
So Biden is not behind. So the Trump political report, the Cook political report, which is a font of conventional wisdom in terms of political prognostication, says that the shift toward Trump, which they only have at 47-44 in their vote analysis, which is being done by Dave Wasserman, who is not exactly a Republican shill, is that the shift toward Trump is the most dramatic shift in polling, what would you call it, momentum that they've seen in many, many years. And that their analysis is that the race is decisively shifted in Trump's favor. So these are all the data points.
And I think it was David Weigel, who may have been taking from Harry Enton of CNN, but Weigel-Enton observed earlier this week that this is the first time in 24 years that the Republican candidate for president has been leading in the second week of July. 24 years. So my point when asking,
an incumbent, that includes
when Bush was slightly behind.
I
know.
Yeah.
So my point in raising the Dole analogy is it's going to set in among many Democrats, and indeed is already setting in, that Biden's going to lose. And
Michael Bennet, we need to point this out.
Exactly.
This is probably why Pelosi said what she said this morning. Michael Bennet, senator from Colorado, which, by the way, if Oregon is in play, Colorado, for all we know, could be in play. I mean, it was a Republican state until 2 cycles ago, and had 2 Republican senators, maybe 1, but it had Cory Gardner was a Republican senator, and it's a very ideologically weird state. Lauren Boebert obviously represents part of Colorado, for example. But Michael Bennet and Jared Polis, the governor, who is the most moderate Democratic governor, maybe, except for Josh Shapiro, said Biden's going to lose. He just said there's no way that Biden can win. And he said that last night. And so Pelosi basically came out at the second part of her statement was, let's just stop talking about this until the NATO summit is over. Let's see how he does with the NATO summit. Maybe it'll be great. And then we can restart the conversation after the NATO summit.
But this is the point, right? This conversation, if it's happening about whether he should be president in January, means we should be having it about whether he's competent to be president now. And that's really the elephant in the room that nobody in the Democratic Party wants to touch. They say things like, well, if he could just show us, he could campaign vigorously. That's what Bennett said. Campaign vigorously, day and night. Show us your passion. Well, he can't do that. Can he step in front of a camera and just riff with reporters for even 10 minutes without a teleprompter or cards telling him what to say? No, he cannot. So that's what I'm worried about. Should he step down now? Because there are serious things happening in the world every day. And the idea that this guy isn't actually running the show is not reassuring.
Well, that's kind of the problem that Democrats are facing, right? Which is, you admit the problem now, and you admit that the stories that are coming out about, the Germans trying to make a dinner at early bird special 4:30 or something, and still can't get Biden in the room because he had to go to sleep and have to get the Secretary of State instead in 2022. Once you open the door, it all flows out, right? I mean, the dam, you can't just crack the dam and have a little bit of water flow out. What you have is, yes, an acknowledgement that there's a problem now, there was a problem last year. There was a problem 2 years ago, and everybody knew it. The Germans were scheduling, international conferences based on the idea that there's a 50% chance the president of the United States will still be awake at 7 p.m. or whatever. So I think that's the trouble for Democrats, is that, he can't go on being president if he can't be president in a few months. And so I think that the Democrats actually would like that, because, handing off to Harris in a campaign and giving her some measure of incumbency would give her something of a boost in a year when, a presidential campaign year is a year when everybody's activated. Super PACs are activated. The money is flowing in, everybody is hyped up. I think that that's what they want, honestly, but they can't say Joe Biden can't be president right now this second. So
it's stuck. Even more, if you're enjoying this the way I'm enjoying this, it's even more delicious than you are letting on, because Trump now has a secondary issue that he can use from now until the election, Biden in or out or whatever, which is, look, let's be real. A vote for Joe Biden is a vote for President Kamala Harris. He's not making it to 2028. I know he's not making it to 2028. You're not just voting for him.
George Stephanopoulos knows.
Yeah,
He's
George
not making-
Stephanopoulos said, right, and then he said, I shouldn't have. I
Yeah, he
shouldn't
just
have
like,
said
oops, a
something.
daisy.
Oops. Yes, he said something to a person on the street. So Trump now gets to run against Biden and Harris. He gets to run against two incumbent potential presidents, both of whom are very unpopular. So he's unpopular. They're unpopular. So he's got two unpopulars versus his one unpopular. And there's nothing that they can do about it aside from the crazy Hail Mary that is best described on the Hacks on Tap podcast this week with Mike Murphy and David Axelrod, and Bill Kristol is on with them. And they go through the scenario of this blitz primary idea that right now, Biden should step down, and then they have 6 weeks until the Democratic convention, and they could seize the spotlight, and interesting things could happen. I mean, they have a particularly hilarious idea, which is that Mark Kelly, the senator from Arizona, should be the presidential nominee because he's a fighter pilot and a hero, and he was an astronaut, and he's tough on immigration and all of that. Like, the Democratic Party and its nominating 4,000 delegates are going to pick a moderate from Arizona as their presidential standard bearer. Nonetheless, it's worth listening to because it lays out there could be excitement. It's an entirely new political phenomenon. And why not, just for the hell of it, why not roll the dice? Every indicator we have here is that the Democratic Party is sliding down the Grand Canyon. And when you start sliding down the Grand Canyon, you can't climb back up, or just you're in the Gobi Desert and you're just going down 100 feet down the sand. Like, there's nowhere to go up here from here. I don't understand how Biden rights the ship unless Trump blows himself up. And this is the last thing I want to say. I watched the Trump rally last night in Florida, and that guy thinks that he is winning this election. And the thing that's interesting about watching him, confident, he's all the same Trump, but there's an edge that was removed from him, which is the edge of, you people this country stinks. He doesn't think the country stinks anymore because he thinks he's going to be president. He was funny. I mean, he's Trump. So if you hate him, you'll still hate him. And if you think the shtick and the insults and all that are terrible, you won't change your mind about that. And you won't like the way he talks about, immigrants and that sort of thing. But he thinks he's got it in the bag. And that is new. That is not the way he has ever run. He didn't think he had it in the bag in 2016. He didn't think he had it in the bag in 2020. And now there is a kind of jaunty cheerfulness to him that is what winners have. So
somebody reminded me on Twitter that when I said on the podcast a while back that it might be time for us to accept that the universe wants Donald Trump to be president.
Yeah.
Well, somebody said, "Hey, remember when?" That's what he looked like last night. He looked like, "Hey, like the who expected us to be here? Not me. These all.
I'm
these,
just going
these,
along. I'm going to lose.
Can you believe it?
I'm planning a post 2016 election vacation with Melania, and whoop, James Comey reopens the investigation, October 20. If you're Trump, you have this history of things coming out of nowhere. I'm actually in real trouble against Ron DeSantis. Whoop! They raid Mar-a-Lago and then I get indicted. Like, gee.
Unconvicted.
And now unconvicted, right. So I'm just saying, like, he looks like the cat who ate the canary. I don't understand now why, because I don't see the modality of it, because I don't know how you make this happen unless.
Well, I wanted to ask about the Hacks on Top podcast, which I have not been able to listen to. Do they reckon with this Ohio virtual nomination deadline?
No.
Right. So
no. So there are logistical.
There's these logistical barriers to switching out the nominee, and according to the Axios newsletter, I believe the Biden camp in Wilmington, which is locked down, is committed to seeing this through to the end. they believe that really the anti-Biden forces in the Democratic Party have only until July 19th in order to push him aside, because by July 19th, certain steps are taken to that eventually result in the convention at the end of August. And among them is this virtual nomination that they will have in order to comply with an Ohio law that, by the way, has been changed. They don't actually have to nominate him virtually. The legislature and Governor Mike DeWine, the Republican of Ohio, changed the law to allow them to just normally nominate Biden at the convention. But the Biden campaign is sticking with this virtual process. Why? They want to lock him in. They want a choke off and to stop these scenarios that are being floated by people like Murphy, Axelrod, and Bill Kristol. So I think that we can talk about all this,
right,
but we have Bob Dole too in Joe Biden, and it doesn't get any better from here.
But that's my point. So my point is that though I have not thought from the beginning that he would step down, I suppose today is Wednesday the 10th. The Republican convention begins in 5 days on Monday the 15th. Their polling is now cooking up again because there's something really to poll here, right? There's actually something of interest. These stories are all going to get attention. It's worth it to some of these organizations to spend the money on polling that they might be spending. And if all the news is bad over the next 5 days, all the news is bad, you could see a scenario in which somehow it penetrates to Biden's deep core that he could suffer one of the most humiliating defeats ever, and that he can still pull out the I am doing this for the good of the country, and I love this country so, and I love my party, and I know my party is full of people who can be the greatest president ever. And I would prefer that to be Kamala Harris, but I love my party and this country. We just saw an amazing result in other countries where people have made decisions in very quick order. Other countries have 6-week primaries. We could have a 6-week primary, blah, 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 blah. You know, like you could do whatever. If it looks like everything is going badly his way, if Siena polls New York and the poll, he was up, I don't know what he was, 8 in the last Siena poll. If somehow Siena in New York came in.
Do you think that the Biden we saw on Stephanopoulos
denial and
calling
inertia
into Morning Joe will have that response?
We don't even know what he's being told. Like the denial sounds like he might not even being given the full picture that we are all looking at now. But the inertia.
Are you saying Hunter Biden is withholding information from the president?
It would be shocking.
Well, I was just going to say that the family dynamic that Matt discussed about the Democratic Party being a family. Yeah, it's like the Biden family. Like Hunter's on crack and they don't do anything about it. How's that for an analogy? It takes the intervention of the Justice Department.
I don't want to be a part of that family.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying that's a really, it's a really loving and wonderful family, where the son is sleeping with the widow of the brother and introducing that widow to crack. They're very tight knit, and the convicted felon. The other convicted felon in American politics right now is going to probably be sitting in with Joe Biden at the NATO summit.
I think, I'll tell you, who's looking forward the most to the Republican convention? Biden. Yeah. Because at least he thinks it will be a breather from all of the public discussions of whether to replace him. On the other hand,
it won't.
Right,
because all they're going to do is put him
that
for 4 days.
Someone raised
Biden may get a speaking slot. They may ask him to speak.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I mean, someone raised the analogy of 2004, where a lot of the Republican convention was devoted simply to attacking Kerry on his war service and his dishonesty about some aspects of it. And we can see something similar happen next week with the RNC, where they will be just playing clip after clip from that debate, illustrating Biden's incapacity to be president. So, yeah, it will take the spotlight off some of the Democrats, but it probably won't help him any in the end.
What about Biden's own convention, though? Here's my question, because in the past few months, we've been talking about the Democratic convention in terms of there's going to be protesters outside and all that stuff in Chicago. And obviously, Mayor Daley is saying, Biden's staying in. He's my guy. I'm backing him. So the host of the convention, but
Johnson.
I'm sorry, Johnson. I said Daley. Yeah, look at that. He wishes.
Freudian.
He wishes there was a Daley.
Daley.
Wishes there was a Daley in Chicago. So Johnson says, he's my guy, whatever. So, but here's the question: what happens inside we haven't really thought much about what happens inside the building, but not that you could easily mount a challenge. But remember when Trump was running in 2016, there were all sorts of things that people were going to do. And then Ted Cruz got up and said, you should vote your conscience. And Trump got up while Ted Cruz was speaking and walked out of the glass box, right? And so that the cameras turned on him. It was like a very professional wrestling move where they were like tussling in real time over that sort of thing. I'm not sure if the Democrats are fully prepared for what goes on inside the building, just in case.
Can I just give you a little taste, courtesy of the must-read Jewish Insider newsletter this morning? There was a session yesterday, apparently by Zoom, to discuss the Israel issue in advance of the Democratic platform writing. And something interesting happened at that Zoom meeting, which is that Haley Sofer, who's the head of the sort of Jewish Democratic group, and another person who was, did Jewish outreach, talked about how Biden supports Israel and blah, blah, blah. But they allowed someone named Elian Farhal to speak on the call. Elian Farhal is the head of Take Action Minnesota. And Elian Farhal, who is, I love this, half indigenous and half Lebanese. So she's got
which half was speaking.
She's got yichus, as we say in Yiddish. She was allowed to say that they had to, come out in favor of Gaza on this call. She was the organizer in Minnesota of the uncommitted ballot initiative. If you remember, the idea was that people should vote uncommitted rather than for Biden during the primary, in order to express their disgust and loathing at the Biden administration's behavior when it came to Israel and Gaza. And the platform writing committee allowed her to speak rather than say, you actually organized an effort to take down our nominee, and we're going to allow you to have a hearing here. That's a weak party. Like that. I mean, this is not, no one even ever needed to know that this meeting was taking place. If you don't invite someone, they can't say I wasn't invited. I mean, if you invite them and then you disinvite them, then there's a story. They're still worried, and they still think, if they think they can buy off people like our half indigenous, half Lebanese head of Take Action Minnesota by giving them like a lollipop so that they can be on the Zoom call. Boy, I mean, aside from everything else we're talking about, I don't know what that says about what kind of zoo this platform negotiation is going to be over the course of the next 6 weeks, or what's going to happen at the convention. But right now, if I were one of those, I need like a firm hand to make sure that there isn't an open revolt on the floor from the delegates against Biden. That's not what they're showing.
I said this earlier, 2 words: Paul Manafort.
But he's got, look, who are the two groups who have rallied very quickly to Biden's defense in the last week? You've got the progressives, you've got AOC, Ilhan Omar, people who had been quite critical of his Israel policy, and you've got Congressional Black Caucus, same thing. So he's clearly, someone in his administration is trying to consolidate that support ahead of the convention.
Right. Two other things, then I got to go to an ad. Story in the Washington Post says Why is Biden solidifying? Unions. Lead story in the Washington Post. Unions are the reason that he is consolidating his support. The unions, the AFL-CIO, the teachers unions, all of that, they are standing behind him. He's the best labor president ever. And I think fair is fair. He has given them a lot of goodies, and they are, rewarding him in this way. But let's just talk about unions for a second, because I know for the last 4 years there have been amazing amounts of sentimentality about unions and about the power of the Congressional Black Caucus. So I did a little math. 7% of the American workforce are members of private sector unions. Total union employment in the United States is 8.7% out of all, that's public and private sector employees, 8.7%. And half of those are public sector workers. So the private sector employment force is 95% of private sector employees are not union members of unions. And the Congressional Black Caucus makes up 12.6% of the overall House, 55 members. So there's a national crisis involving a president who is intellectually or cerebrally infirm. And he is going to make his way through this with the support of a sliver of a sliver of American workers represented by unions, and by a caucus within the House that represents 12% of the House, not even 12% of the population of the country, 12% of the House. And it's working. What kind of national party is this? I thought they represented, there were 81 million Democratic voters in 2020. This is weird that it should take these, I'm picking off this group, a little bit over here, a little bit over there. It's not even like the Democratic caucus in the House, which is, 213? Like if the Democratic caucus came up and said, we are on Biden's side, here we are, but that would be one thing. That would be the party is supporting him. He is picking off slivers, and this is the atomization of American politics here.
Well, it's the key to Biden's coalition. It's always been labor and the black vote. And it was the case in how he won the nomination in 2020. When he came in 5th in New Hampshire, I think. It just a terrible performance. A lot of people, including me, wrote him off. But he had always enjoyed the support of black voters, and he won South Carolina, and that bounced him back. So it's not too big of a difference. His core support is there. I think if they press ahead, and I believe they will, they'll go into the convention at the end of August, and they will put on a show, and it will be anti-Trump, and it will be, we're all happy. And the main disruptions will be from the anti-Israel groups. I don't think there will be any showdown like there was in the 2016 RNC. Because Biden essentially called the bluff in his Morning Joe interview, where he said, when he was screaming at Mika and Joe and said, challenge me. No one has challenged him. No.
Okay, let me ask you this. Let me ask you guys this. Why not? That's what I started with. All the data say challenge him. If he's elected, he'll be a lame duck. If he loses,
it's Kamala.
Are they going to
Kamala? It's Kamala, because they can't. She is the obstacle over which none of them want to crawl. Honestly, because they don't know what Biden would do if he was challenged by someone outside his administration. He might then say, fine, you're right, I'm stepping down. Let's give it all our support and money. There's a lot of money involved here, too. She gets the money if he steps down. Another candidate does not. And who's going to step in front of the first possible black female president in the Democratic Party? No one.
Right. Kamala Harris would be the first ever second black president. And I don't think anybody wants
first India, by the way, the first South Asian president. That's what she should go with.
But I just want to
Like, so
remind
that's
people.
her. That's her. That's her.
I just
Really.
want to remind people what we're talking about what Nancy Pelosi had to say about Joe Biden. But I want to remind people, last year when she was asked about whether Kamala Harris was the right vice president and vice presidential candidate to stay on the ticket, or whether Harris should be dropped from the ticket. And she was on CNN and she was asked by Anderson Cooper, is Harris the best running mate? And she said, he thinks so, and that's what matters. So these responses have been, remember, this is very much like last
a
year.
shiv in the ribs, Nancy, man.
Yeah, she hasn't really, and they asked, if you remember, that ignited a second day of the story, and Jake Tapper asked Jamie Raskin, the Democratic congressman from Maryland, well, what do you think? Is Harris the best? And he said, well, that's President Biden's choice.
Boy, they really must not like her. I mean, she must be so bad in those rooms.
Yeah,
think about what this means. How hard is it to say Kamala Harris is the greatest vice president the United States has ever had?
So that's what
Jake
Tapper couldn't quite believe what was happening, and this is how that discussion ended. Tapper asked a third time, and Raskin said, "quote I don't know what else I can say," and Jake responded, "quote you could say yes."
Okay, so you're saying it's the Kamala threat. I understand that you stick with the devil you know rather than the devil you don't know. I'm just saying, I'm saying that there is a scenario, and yeah, it's fanciful, but a week more of this, and I don't know. Yeah, I mean, Biden's looking at it and saying she's less popular than I am. Newsom doesn't do any better. Nobody does any better. But it's actually yet another mark of some disease in American politics that somebody major isn't grasping the horns and saying the emperor has no clothes. Okay, Biden's had 12 days since the debate. Who's kidding who? I'm Gavin Newsom, and I'm putting my political future on the line to save this country from Donald Trump. And the only way to do that is for me to challenge Biden at the convention or something like that. Like, does nobody have a creative bone in their body in American politics?
I think it says a couple things. The first is that Gavin Newsom does not believe democracy is on the line with this election. Okay. Only the most paranoid and addled members of the resistance believe that American democracy will end if Donald Trump is elected and he will institute some type of dictatorship. So most Democrats, in my view, understand that if he wins, then you're going to have another Trump term. It'll be a lot like the last Trump term. And actually, maybe it'll be better for Democrats in 28 because you'll have an open race.
And 26, yeah.
Right. And in 26, of course, 2018 was a great year for Democrats. So I think that explains a lot of what the Democratic elites that Biden hates so much are thinking internally. But you raise another topic, which is important, which is the scandal in some ways is just beginning as we learn more about the visits to the White House by the neurologist. The press secretary now had to come out and revise her statement. Basically, she lied to the press, and she's now correcting herself. We have that viral video of the NBC News interview with the neurologist where this self-identified Democrat physician says, of course Biden has Parkinson's. I see 20 people like him every day. The mystery of what is going on with Biden and the extent of the cover-up, which implicates Kamala Harris, by the way,
that assumes she ever sees him.
Yeah, well, she, they
so the cover up is either that she knew or that she basically has been sitting in the East Wing, or
she's participated in the lie. Yeah, and that's still going to continue, and there's no good option for the Democrats because of the decisions they made in the aftermath of the 2022 midterm. And we kind of mentioned this in a recent episode, but I didn't get the chance to make this observation. If the 2022 midterm had gone the way that most people expected it to go, with the red wave, with the gigantic Republican majorities in the House and Republican pickups elsewhere, that's when they would have dropped Biden.
Right.
That's when they would have. But because the red wave didn't materialize, because Democrats overperformed, you had this situation where people thought, oh, okay, well, Trump's at a low point. We're going to shackle him with all of these lawsuits and convictions, and eventually with shackles, if we get our wish, Biden will be able to manage. So let's close ranks. Let's ignore Dean Phillips. Let's box out RFK Jr. and we're going to go with Biden. That was the mistake, and they are paying for it. And they seem to be on a trajectory to pay for it big time in November.
And that's why I'm enjoying myself so much. And I want to help other people enjoy the summer the way I'm enjoying the summer. And one of the ways you can enjoy the summer is by outfitting yourself with Boll & Branch sheets, because it is the annual summer event over at Boll & Branch. Get 20% off site-wide and save on bestsellers like Boll & Branch's signature hem sheets. They feel buttery to the touch. They're super breathable, so they're perfect for both cooler and warmer weather. Their signature sheets are made with 100% organic cotton using the highest quality threads that are completely traceable. This is Boll & Branch's best sale of the season. So take this chance to upgrade your bed and sleep better for years to come. And there are amazing options for hot sleepers. Choose from 100% organic cotton percale that's made with a naturally cooling weave, or their linen, which is made from European flax to be light, airy, and softer than soft. Loved by millions of sleepers. Over 11,000 five-star reviews. And don't forget that 30-night worry-free guarantee, which means you can wash, style, and sleep in their sheets for an entire month. And if you don't love them for any reason, you can send them right back with free returns on all U.S. orders. And it's not just sheets. Boll & Branch has the airiest blankets, most cloud-like duvets, fluffiest pillows, and so much more. So get the best savings of the season during Boll & Branch's annual summer event. For a limited time, you can get 20% off site-wide, plus free shipping and a free gift with qualifying purchases at bollandbranch.com with promo code commentary. That's BOLLAND branch.com, promo code commentary for 20% off and a free gift. Exclusions apply. See site for details. Guys, I think we need to talk Veep, because we are 5 days away from the convention, and Trump last night was playing games with Marco Rubio. He was enjoying the hell out of having Marco Rubio in that stadium in Florida. He kept saying, Marco, I think maybe we'll see each other next week, or maybe not. I don't know. Maybe we will. Maybe we won't. It's fun to see you here. Does such a great job. You've done such a great job. Meanwhile, Kristi Noem has erased her entire social media presence. I don't think Kristi Noem will be I don't think you,
and her autobiography,
the dog shooter.
The autobiography has been edited down to 20 pages.
Weird thing about J.D. Vance in East Palestine. And again, not to cite other podcasts, though, these are all our friends, so I'm happy to do it. The editors yesterday, so Noah and Rich and Jim Garrity and MBD, all basically, they seem to think that J.D. Vance is the likeliest of the candidates. Something in me says this would not be true because of Trump's animal cunning, by which I mean that J.D. Vance is the hungriest person in the history of American politics. And I would, if I were Trump, not want him to be my vice president for the Cassius reason. I don't know whether I could trust him. I'm also going to be 80 years old in a minute. I also, somebody could organize something against me. I have spent my entire life as Donald Trump being properly paranoid about my enemies and my friends. And so I don't know if that's really the safe bet, but I have nothing else but that. And the fact that Trump is so not really that ideological that he doesn't need a Trump light as his vice president. That's
and Vance is speaking today at the National Conservative Conference, which is going on here in DC. and at some VIP dinner tonight. And the thing about him is that he isn't he's a very convenient ideologue, right? I mean, he became a very fast track MAGA guy when that clearly politically seemed like it would pay off for him. But he actually strikes, I think, a lot of people, including on the MAGA right and on the national conservative right, as a little too malleable, right? You actually can't trust him. And so I'm not sure that he would bring
fair
those
enough.
people to Trump.
I still love the book. I still loved Hillbilly Elegy. He wrote a very, very good book review for us once. I think he's extraordinarily unprincipled, which I think would make him the sort of person that Trump would want, because he would surrender his principle to Trump's, what Trump's needs. I just don't see what advantage Trump gets from him if Trump thinks that there is an advantage to be gotten. I see the advantage in Rubio. There's this weird thing with the Florida residency question, constitutional question, that I don't quite understand how it gets resolved. But the thing that leads me to be in the kind of Rubio camp, and I'm not happy with Rubio either and his own progression since 2016. So this is not because I would like him as vice president necessarily, although he would be good on a lot of issues that I do care about very much, I think. But is that his name shouldn't be in the mix because of the fact that he and Trump are both residents of the state of Florida, and that you cannot be, according to the Constitution. So something would have to give. And you would think that basically the great mentioner would have stopped mentioning him because of the logistical difficulties that poses. The fact that he is still one of the two major names, maybe three major names.
I'll give you a theory.
Okay.
One is Rubio probably has a relationship with Susie Wiles, Trump's chief strategist, who's been in Florida politics for decades, and of course worked for DeSantis before jumping ship and joining Trump and leading Trump on Trump's most effective campaign ever. So that might be a reason. Another reason is I think the Trump campaign understands the importance of Hispanic voters, and to have Rubio there, able to tell his story, able to tell it in Spanish, able to communicate in the way Rubio is a pretty effective communicator, except when he has his moments, like with Chris Christie in 2016.
That's really only one moment, though. That's the interesting thing.
No, remember his response to the State of the Union with the water?
Oh, the water.
And the eyes. It wasn't even the water. It was the expression in his eyes.
Okay, fair enough.
He had crazy eyes.
He was very bad moments.
They found me out.
You say JD Vance is too hungry and Marco Rubio is too thirsty.
Fair enough.
I want to. So there are upsides to Rubio. There's some potential downsides. You mentioned some of them. I mean, all the footage of Trump calling him Little Marco. With Vance, I think MAGA really does love Vance, Christine. I'm not sure they still think he's a phony like others in the Republican Party do. MAGA likes him. He's Ohio, and the Trump campaign also wants the blue wall states, right? So there's like a Sunbelt strategy for Rubio because of Hispanic voters. Those states, Arizona, Nevada, Florida, they're Georgia, North Carolina. Those are basically solid for Trump now. But the blue wall, that's where the Trump campaign remains a little bit nervous. Older voters, the non-college educated white working class, core of Trump's support in 2016. Maybe the argument is that Vance could play to them. And of course, he only needs one of those three states to win the election. The downside with Vance is he's been in office for a little bit over a year. Do you want a stealth vice presidential candidate? Oftentimes that doesn't really work out very well. Like, you don't know. The last time a Republican nominee picked someone young and relatively untested was Sarah Palin. Very different than J.D. Vance, obviously. Before that, it was Dan Quayle. Yeah. The Quayle nomination was not necessarily a success. Now, I think Vance is more glib than Quayle. I don't think he'll have the type of gaffes that Quayle did or that Palin did, but there's a certain uncertainty there. I do think so. I'm of the view on the V question. I just find it hard to accept that Trump will follow what the media is saying.
Yeah,
and right now the media is saying, "Oh, it's Rubio, Vance, and maybe Burgum," and to me, I'm just so used to Trump rejecting the media narrative.
Yeah.
That I think maybe there's a possibility that he'll pick someone outside that trio.
There's
So
a third
that,
argument for
yeah.
Rubio, and that argument is that DeSantis, the governor, is term limited, and it would open up the Senate seat for DeSantis to move into with no other
But Trump doesn't.
place to go immediately after that.
Yeah,
And
I
think
Trump couldn't care a fig about any, like, the idea that Trump would be thinking about how to make sure that the Senate is in. If Trump, by the way, the Republican will win the Senate seat in 2026, and Florida is going deep red. So I just don't think is a real thing for him. Of all people, the idea that he would be making choices to ensure a good successor in 2026 for Rubio, whatever is, I can't go.
I think he likes taking credit for people's success, and he likes taking credit for DeSantis's success and popularity on the right.
Fair enough.
That would be the reason I would think he.
Okay, but let's talk about other people. So we've now talked about Vance, and so then there is Burgum is number 3. So Burgum is the guy who isn't a Washington guy, rich guy, energy guy. Looks like a vice president out of a movie like Olympus Has Fallen or something like that, like the second rank sci-fi TV movie about when the aliens are. He's the vice president with the gray, temples,
great hair, temples. Great eyebrows.
I was just gonna say, Matt, you better get in there.
My favorite governor, in the country.
Yeah,
he'd be great.
Right. So there's Glenn Youngkin. Interestingly enough, though, Glenn Youngkin, who also is rich, right, and has had a successful term. Has a very strong government. Just did a very big thing that could be very useful, which is that he announced that schools in Virginia kids will not be allowed to have phones in public schools in Virginia.
Yes. Huge,
right? Which is, I think, which is a weirdly.
So can I just say something about Youngkin? I think politically, from my view, Youngkin has the most upside. I think Youngkin on the ticket resets the race in a way that would be tremendously to Donald Trump's advantage. One, it puts Virginia in play. Virginia already seems to be pretty close, and especially with the shift that we're seeing post-debate, I think it's on the edge of being a battleground. Youngkin there, I think, immediately makes it a battleground state. You win Virginia, you win the election, right? So that's one. Two, if you think about Trump, in 2016, he chose Pence because he still needed to shore up his base with evangelical Christians and with the conservative movement. So Pence was a great transaction there because it brought on those voters, reassured them. Pence has gravitas, was able to be a plausible president. So what's Trump's play now? As we've been talking about on the podcast, Trump doesn't need the right anymore. And in fact, he's kind of distancing himself from it. What he needs is the middle of the country, and that's what he's playing for. You bring Glenn Youngkin on the ticket, independent voters, suburban voters, Hispanic voters, women voters, all of the keys to Youngkin's winning coalition in 21, they are now going to be reassured in the same way that conservatives were reassured by Pence. Potential downsides to Youngkin, Youngkin, like Vance, relatively untested, and he's
one race.
He's had one race, just like Vance has had, and it was a more impressive victory, I think, in some ways than Vance's. But he's had setbacks. He lost the FBI headquarters. He lost the stadium. He thought he was going to bring the Wizards over to Virginia. He made this bet that he was going to be able to win the legislature last year. That did not work out. Now, it wasn't a complete disaster, but it didn't work out. And then he also had that gaffe after Paul Pelosi was attacked by the psychopath with the hammer, where he had to apologize to Pelosi. So there is kind of an untested quality to him. On the other hand, Youngkin has this Teflon likability thing that is, I think, his superpower, and that would add a lot to the ticket.
By the way, so I'm looking at the polling. So that Virginia has not been polled.
No, not like a month. June. Yeah, exactly.
But in June, before the debate, every poll had it as a 1-point race.
Right.
We have Beacon, Biden 42, Trump 41. Actually, it's pretty much the only one. In May 12th to the 21st, Roanoke had it 40 Biden, 38 Trump. And Roanoke before that had it tied. So it is in play. And yeah, if he wins, I think Virginia has 10 electoral votes. Like, if Virginia's in play and he could take Virginia, then the blue wall starts to crumble.
He doesn't really need the blue wall. Right. I mean, the map,
So,
as we said,
yeah.
the map is in some ways looking like the '04 map, where Bush didn't win any of the Rust Belt states,
Right.
other than Ohio.
Right. And the thing, Ohio won the race. And by the way, that was the narrowest electoral college victory in, I don't know,
close.
Pretty much in history. Like, it was,
the map is opening up for Trump in ways that it hasn't been for like 40 years for Republican.
Yeah. And then there's Nevada, right? So Nevada, which is really interesting. And this tipping thing, Christine mentioned it. Yes. This thing where Trump says he wants to make tips tax-free, stop taxing tips. That is a direct play for Clark County, Nevada, which has the largest number of tip, as a percentage of the employees in a given state. The tipping economy in Nevada is a very serious matter. That's what that is going for. And like, again, Nevada's gone Democratic for what? I don't know, 20 years or something like that. I don't think McCain won it. So
no, 20 years. Yeah, since
20 years. Okay. Now, that's not a lot of electoral college votes, but you pull that off the map for Biden. And New Hampshire, which is also, I think, 4 electoral votes, but New Hampshire, you just start cobbling together things, and not only won't Trump necessarily need the whole blue wall, but if everything is moving that way, we're talking about a potential semi-electoral landslide, which then brings us back to the question of if there is a Democratic Party, which I don't think there is, there's only a presidential party, why you wouldn't roll the dice facing the prospects that you're facing.
The other side of
Nevada, by the way, is a huge also Hispanic voting.
That's right. So
the other sign of desperation to keep an eye on this week, and I was ranting about this on our text chain earlier, is the reason you're hearing lots of Democrats talk about Project 2025 this week, which has been out for over a year, is that they're desperate to try to shift back to focusing on Trump as fascist. Trump, of course, has disavowed Project 2025. It's a heritage think tank, wish list. It's a lot of things, but it's not the GOP platform. They are desperate to try to link that to Trump and change the narrative.
This connects to the point that I was trying to make about Trump's rally last night. So the rhetoric of the MAGA wing of the party remains apocalyptic, and best expressed, actually, and the reason that the Project 2025 has suddenly resurfaced or has surfaced as an issue is that Kevin Roberts, the president of the Heritage Foundation and a intellectual and political disgrace of a very high order, Kevin Roberts came out and said, "We'll have a bloodless revolution if we're going to have a bloodless revolution if the liberals allow it." Meaning,
on Bannon's podcast, the last one he recorded before he reported to prison.
So the head of a think tank that was instrumental at one point in helping to staff an administration 44 years ago. So let's just make it clear that Mandate for Leadership, the Heritage blueprint for the Reagan administration, was 44 years ago. Heritage, though it has $250 squillion a year, nonetheless has had remarkably little influence in that way for a very long time. And I say this, by the way, with a connection to Heritage because my mother was on the Heritage board for 4 decades, almost. Kevin Roberts invented the Project 2025 issue with this psychotic comment about how, we're leading a revolution. And other people have been, this NatCon conference that Yoram Hazony, a former contributor and never again contributor to commentary, is leading. is full of this rhetoric. And that was not Trump last night. This is what I'm trying to convey. And it'll be interesting. People should watch if he has another rally before the convention. Trump is feeling good. He is feeling good. He is saying they're the worst people ever and everything is terrible. We're gonna close the borders and we're gonna have tariffs and all this. But the music is 76 trombones. The music is not, I don't know,
Beethoven's Fifth.
Now. Yeah.
I believe there's a rally scheduled for this weekend in Pennsylvania featuring Vance.
Uh-huh.
So he did one with Rubio in Florida, and I think he's going to do another with Vance. And as he said to Sean Hannity this week, Trump is open to the possibility of keeping the identity of the VP unknown until the convention because he thinks it'll be
TV,
exciting, right?
The reveal.
Do a masked singer. Like a masked singer.
Or line them all
That would
up.
be great. What if he lined them all up?
My apprentice.
Like Miss America.
He used to run the Miss Universe, right?
Yeah,
he used to own it.
I do not want a bathing suit competition in this race, ladies and gentlemen. Let us not.
It'll be masked singer.
Or American Idol.
Rubio will take off, a giant cat head or something.
It's so interesting to me to explore this question, John, that you raised, because this is a different style of campaigning than we are used to from Donald Trump. In 2016, 2020, 2022, Trump is about his base. It's all he cares about is his base. Keep MAGA happy, keep the right wing happy. I got to short my base. I'm going to win it just with my core supporters. In 2024, for this year, he has steadily moved to the center. He is more moderate than MAGA. I think it was David Brooks who first made this observation some months ago, and he's completely right. He's more moderate than MAGA, and that opens up all these avenues to winning. And now the right will still be with him. MAGA is still going to be with him, just as conservatives were with Reagan, even when Reagan deviated throughout his presidency. That sometimes they criticized him. It would be funny to see in a second Trump term if MAGA does pick fights. Now, I would say based on the response to the changes in the platform we were talking about with regard to abortion, we don't really see that. There's just a lot of like, okay, we'll accept this because we want to win above all. Whether that translates into governance as well, we'll have to wait and see.
Well, I think there's citing again the editor's podcast, which I listened to yesterday, Rich Lowry asked his colleagues, how MAGA would a new Trump administration be, or a Trump White House? Would it be more MAGA or less MAGA? And as they were discussing it, I thought, honestly, I don't even know how to define MAGA anymore, because there is Trump MAGA, and then there is the Trump movement, or there is the movement MAGA, and they are not singing from the same hymnal, except maybe on immigration. I mean, maybe on immigration, it's the same hymnal, but they have a lot of stuff that they want, that they're eager to promote on the intellectual MAGA side or the movement MAGA side, that I don't think Trump has the slightest interest in and would not spend a penny's political capital on. And because he now knows that he has the party in his hand, he will not feel it necessary to play to them unless he thinks that their fealty is so important that their fealty will be to him. And therefore, it will be very much like Reagan in this sense, which is the right never went after Reagan. The only person who attacked Reagan in 1982, as I recall, was my father, who wrote an attack on Reagan's foreign policy in the New York Times Magazine called The Neoconservative Anguish Over Reagan's Foreign Policy. What did the Heritage Foundation do? The Heritage Foundation didn't blame Reagan. It crazily, one of the first crazy moments as Heritage was going, it was not really crazy then, but it decided to campaign for the firing of George Shultz, the Secretary of State, who happened, as it happens, to be the greatest Secretary of State of our lifetime, almost without question, and an extraordinary public servant. But they didn't want to attack. They wanted to say the Reagan administration was being too soft on the Soviets, but they would not go against Reagan. And so I think what you'll see in a second term is Trump is impregnable, and that there will be the classic thing where Trump will hire people, and then maybe in order to send a message to him, the MAGA wing will say you should get rid of that guy. He's not really with you. He's betraying your principles.
Really, what you're saying is they're just going to attack us and blame us, even though we'll have no influence whatsoever. But we'll still be singled out.
Why not? That's
that's been basically par for the course for the past decade. So we can expect that to continue in the second term as well.
Pretty much. Anyway, so where are we if we were going to do? I have no idea who Trump's going to pick. So I really have no. Matt, you think Youngkin would be the best choice for him? I probably would go with Rubio, but if I were thinking of who might be the best choice for him, I think the thing that you said, which is that like Rubio could spend 3 months on talk radio in Spanish, and there's a lot of talk radio in Spanish in the United States and Arizona,
it's pretty pro-Trump.
And Arizona and Nevada. But I'm just saying there's a lot of there are things like if you go through these states and you turn on FM radio, for example, they have top 40 stations, they have oldie stations, stuff like that are your conventional oldie stations that play Steely Dan and Fleetwood Mac and all that. But the disc jockeying is in Spanish. That's the new America.
It'd be a big asset for Trump.
It would be a very interesting asset for him. But I think Youngkin would be a good choice. I
just make sure Rubio has a lot of water at the convention,
right? When
he gives his speech next Thursday or next Wednesday.
I don't know. Christine, do you have a?
I mean, I'm an anyone but Vance, just because I think I don't trust him. Rubio would be good, and I think would suit something about Trump's personality, which is the need to feel like there's someone he humiliated is still willing to grovel to him and grovel for him and do his bidding. I mean, he humiliated Rubio. Rubio's still pro-Trump, and there's something about that Trump really enjoys. That's a test of loyalty for him. I don't think the others have proven that sort of similar amount of willingness to grovel. Also, the vice presidency is a weird job where you don't do anything and you have very little power. So I think that, Rubio, having been a senator, it would be a weird fit for him. But I mean, I would say Rubio would be better than Vance. Youngkin, why would Youngkin want that job is what I think. But
why not?
You're immediately the front runner for the Republican nomination.
Also, he's also a one-term governor.
He can't run for
Virginia's
re-elect.
Constitution.
Yeah. They all want the job. Trust me.
That's true.
Seth, I mean, again, there are two ways to look at this: who you want and whom you think will be the choice. You can go either way.
Right. I think that I still think that Tom Cotton or Tim Scott would make more sense than the so-called finalists were looking at. I think that they're probably, Cotton probably also is still somewhat in the running, but I think of the three that we've been talking about, I always thought Doug Burgum made more sense than the other two because he was just, like you said, central casting. And the thing about Trump is that he doesn't want to be tied down to anything really ideologically. It's not so much what he agrees or disagrees with. He doesn't want anybody thinking that he feels strongly about anything other than immigration. When he has gone on a roller coaster about Ukraine, right? And at one point he said, Biden's not doing all that. If I were president, I would make sure Zelensky had everything he needed to win this war. That's what Trump said. And the next day on Twitter, all of the MAGA guys were like, yeah, got to give Zelensky what he needs, And so it's like, and meanwhile, they every other day of the year, they hate the guy. So I think I think Trump likes flexibility more than anything. I thought Burgum gave him the ultimate amount of flexibility with almost no downside. But if you're going on offense, I think you have to stay away from JD Vance because I think that Vance's connection with the national conservatives, the NatCons, you don't want to pick a vice president who has a domestic constituency, who has a part of the party that follows him, that sees him as a possible champion. This was the problem with Josh Hawley too, but then January 6th kind of cleared up the question of Josh Hawley. anyway. You don't want a guy who has an independent power base in the party. And Rubio does not have an independent power base in the party. So if it's really between those two, Rubio to me is the obvious choice.
So okay, so we have two Rubios, we have a Youngkin. Although I think we're all in pretty much agreement. I mean, I think Cotton would be the best vice president as it happens.
Don't jinx it, John. Don't
Okay,
jinx it.
I
What are
mean,
you
of course
doing?
he would be.
Sorry.
That means
Cotton
we
would be
won't
the
get him.
worst
We won't get what
vice
we want.
president. He would be the worst.
No
How dare I
way.
say this?
He can get it.
Yeah, Natan Sharansky would be the best vice president. Okay, we have not actually assigned a commentary recommends for the day. I have one, but if anybody else wants to throw one in, we're running late. So
I do want to know what's
fast.
happened to all of our little secret podcasts that we were going to release this
okay.
week.
Let me
It's
just
full of recommendations.
We have a fantastic series of podcasts that are undated that we were going to run this week. That we have the best in science fiction. We have various other things, and we will run them over the course of the summer. We'll figure out how to do it. So
that's the Snyder cut.
Yes,
you get the Snyder cut of the commentary.
Release the commentary, the undated commentary podcast cut. Exactly. But anyway, I do have a recommend, but if anybody else wants to, because I did yesterday, so
I want to recommend a YouTube channel.
Oh,
if I may, because we recommend all sorts of things.
I love that.
Here.
That's
but,
great. Yeah.
I'm a fan of a YouTube channel called Red Letter Media. And Red Letter Media is a production of 3 film geek / comics / wannabe filmmakers living in Wisconsin, I believe, in the Midwest. And they've had this channel for many years. They became most famous for their Mr. Plinkett's review of the Star Wars prequel trilogy, which are hilarious. And I've been a fan of them for over a decade now. And I wanted to recommend them this week simply because they had a very intense and interesting discussion of the new Star Wars series on Disney Plus, The Acolyte, which has become another part of our culture war, I think for legitimate reasons. But the show devoted to The Acolyte is an hour and a half long. And in it, Mike Siskelski, I think is how you pronounce his last name, who's the main figure behind Red Letter Media, really kind of gives a, to me, stunning tour d'horizon of the culture, of pop culture, of generational change and how that affects pop culture, and how we should think about some of the more ridiculous aspects of our pop culture today, especially sci-fi geek culture, which is the main interest of Red Letter Media. So it's not for everybody. You kind of have to be a film geek, and in particular, a film geek who is Gen X or an edge millennial like myself, who kind of grew up in the 80s and 90s with a specific type
the best generation.
Yes, the best,
exactly.
Yes, the best generation. But I do want to give them a shout out because as a result of this episode, they were flooded with negative comments.
Yeah.
And those negative comments were undeserved. I think they're entertaining, they're insightful, and so I wanted to give Red Letter Media a shout out on the pod.
What a great recommendation, and we will be back tomorrow. So for Matt, Seth, and Christine, I'm John Podhoretz. Keep the candle burning.